11th successive year, the Aston-Martin team set off for France and, as usual, set up camp at the Hôtel de France in the otherwise sleepy village of La Chartre. Aston had entered a team of 3 DBR1s for Sterling Moss and Jack Fairman, Roy Salvadori and Carroll Shelby, and Paul Frere and Maurice Trantignan. Sterling does not like Le Mans, considering it too dangerous because of the big speed differential between the faster and slower cars and the mass of inexperienced drivers. Over 120 drivers take part, and there are just not that many drivers in the world with enough skill for Le Mans. Reg Parnell in the DBR3 led the team of 3 DBR1s down the tree-lined ramp to the Paysage, where the cars were scrutineered beneath a roofed enclosure. For Eric Hind and the Aston mechanics, the Paysage can be a stressful experience, particularly with the infamous French penchant for zealous rulings. Each scrutineering bay dealt with a separate aspect of the accreditation process. Reg Parnell guided Aston number 4 up onto the weighbridge, and then Sterling Moss took over, declaring the car to weigh 1882 pounds. The Carnet de Paysage gave the car official approval to race. Sterling Moss is now a household name throughout the world, and his signature is always in demand. Such is the price of fame. So, with scrutineering over, we drove back beneath the archways, through the crowded streets of the city of Le Mans, and out towards the circuit for our by now traditional lap of the public road track. Just past the pits, the road sweeps right and uphill beneath the Dunlop Bridge. In the DBR1, this bend is taken at 140 miles an hour, at 5,200 revs in 5th gear. Over the rise and downhill towards the S's, Sterling brakes and changes down to 3rd, 5.7 revs, and drifts through at a mere 107 miles an hour. Then on to Tertre Rouge, a 60 mile an hour right-hander, in 2nd gear if the tank is full, or 3rd as the fuel load gets lighter. Now we're on the Mulsanne straight, which isn't all that straight, and up through the gears with foot hard down, Sterling takes the Aston past that familiar landmark, the Café de la Hippodrome. The rev counter needle is up to 6,000, and the speed is 166 miles an hour. Now over to the left-hand side for Mulsanne corner. At the 300-meter mark, the discs on the DBR1 pull the car back as Sterling brakes and goes down to 1st gear, just 30 miles an hour. Past the signalling pits, up through the gears, again the speed rises to 150 miles an hour. Then it's down to 3rd again, then 2nd now for Indianapolis. Up to 3rd again momentarily, before dropping down to 2nd for Arnage, a 1st gear corner with a full tank. Back on the home straight, accelerating out of Arnage, the road climbs slightly and winds right before dropping down to the notorious White House corner. Sterling takes that in top. Speed, about 122 miles an hour. And so back to the pits once more. To complete a lap of this 8.76-mile circuit has taken Moss a matter of 4 minutes, 3 seconds. First practice session took place on Wednesday evening. Ferrari Testarossas were entered for Jean Bera with Dan Gurney, Cliff Allison with Herenono da Silva Ramos, and Phil Hill and Olivier Gendebien. Jean Bera watched the mechanics work on his car. The V12 is lighter than the Astons and faster too. Bera set off, shadows lengthened by the setting sun. In the Aston pit, Trintignant prepared to drive the car he would race in anger 2 days hence. Final practice at Le Mans is always on the Thursday evening, with Friday always a day off. It is a well-known motor racing maxim that if you polish your car one day, it rains the next. On Saturday morning, the Feltham boys left La Chartre for the circuit. Team personnel followed the race cars in 2 Lagonda shooting brakes. Trintignant looked relaxed and unruffled on race morning. Carroll Shelby had brought along his entire family from the Texas chicken ranch. Jack Fairman was fresh from his victory in the 1,000 kilometers only 2 weeks earlier. Veteran Aston driver Mort Goodall was to man the signalling pit at Mulsanne. The rain clouds had cleared, and the scene was set for Aston's 11th attempt at the 24 Hours of Le Mans. Reg Parnell and chief mechanic Eric Hind were oblivious to the crowds around them. So too was Roy Salvadori, who I saw chatting with former Aston drivers Pat Griffith and Eric Thompson. The squat and purposeful Ferrari was the car most feared by David Brown's team. Neither could the small Porsches be discounted. The German cars are always a model of reliability. The Saabs, however, could. It was such cars, competing in the 750 class, that Sterling thought made the race too dangerous. Aston chief mechanic Eric Hind checked the fuel level on one of the DBR1s. Team manager Reg Parnell, with many enthusiasts, watched over him. After due calculation, Reg was able to tell Eric how much fuel the car should start with. Vast crowds had already taken their place for the start of the race. Le Mans regularly hosts over 200,000 racegoers, of whom about 60,000 can be from Britain. Officials set off to clear the course. Reg's strategy for the race was to give the Moss Fairman car a rev limit of 6,100 revs. The Salvadori Shelby and the Trintignant Frere cars were given a target lap time which ideally they would aim to follow. This was done as a compromise, sacrificing some outright speed for reliability, as to finish first you must finish. I had every confidence that Sterling would take off into the lead from the start, and he did just that, with Innes Ireland in the Ecurie Cost D-type second. At the end of the first lap, Moss led the two works Ferraris of Jean Debien and Da Silva Ramos. Jean Berra's Ferrari had failed to fire up until the leaders were about halfway round the first lap. Into Mulsanne on the second circuit, Moss led from the two Ferraris, with Ireland's Jaguar fourth and Salvadori's Aston fifth. Jean Berra was scything through the field after his tardy start. With only 4 laps gone, the leading Aston was already lapping slower machinery. The other two Astons were running nicely within their time schedules. One hour into the race, lap 14, Moss still led, but was being caught hand over fist by Berra, who was circulating the south at a blistering pace. On the 18th lap, Berra came through in the lead. Moss let Berra go, as he was in any case lapping in 4 minutes 5 seconds, extremely quick for the early stages of a 24-hour race. Steadily Berra began to draw away. Graham Hill rounded Tertre Rouge in the Lotus. Chapman's fragile cars, brown paper and string some call them, have enough difficulty holding together for a short British race, let alone the 24 hours at Le Mans. With 2 hours of the 24 gone, Berra led by 25 seconds from Moss, followed by the two other works Ferraris of Jean Debien and Da Silva Ramos. Salvadori was fifth, a lap behind his team leader. Trintignant in the third DBR1 was ninth. When Berra pitted, Sterling took the lead again. Dan Gurney took over Ferrari number 12 and set off after Moss as the light started to fade. Shelby replaced Salvadori. Behind him on the road was Fairman, having taken the wheel of number 4 from Sterling. Suddenly, on the 66th lap, Fairman stopped in his pit, complaining of fluctuating oil pressure. After a hasty word, Reg Parnell sent him out again to complete his allotted number of laps. Trintignant prepared to take over from Frère. With the Belgian out of the car, the Aston was refueled, oil tank replenished, and the screen quickly cleaned. "53 seconds later, Trintignant rejoined the race in 7th place. "Okay, I'll have a Coke," shouted Frère above the pit lane din. 5 hours into the race, and the Berre-Gurney Ferrari led the Aston by nearly half a minute. When Fairman completed his planned 30 laps, he came in to hand back to Moss. Stirling rejoined, still in 2nd place, but he immediately found the car to be down on power. 2 laps later, at 9:05, he was forced to retire. A small piece of an inlet valve had broken off, and once again the hare had lost to the hounds. As night settled, so did the race. Already there had been 22 retirements. By midnight, the Berre-Gurney Ferrari was having electrical trouble, slowing the car and reducing it to just one headlight. In the early hours of the morning, the lead Ferrari finally retired, promoting the Salvadori Shelby Aston Martin into the lead and the Jean de Bien Hill Ferrari into second. The Frère Trintignant Aston was now third, its stops being merely routine. However, in the cold light of day, things didn't look as good. Salvadori had been delayed with tyre trouble, dropping his Aston to 2nd place. And with 8 hours still to go, Ferrari number 14 led Aston number 5 by 3 laps. The Frère Trintignant Aston was third, and Porsches were 4th, 5th, 6th and 7th. Even though he had retired, Stirling had stayed in the Aston pit all night to cheer on the remaining 2 DBR1s. Carroll Shelby brought the lead Aston in to hand over to Salvadori, who then set off in pursuit of the single remaining works Ferrari. Reg Parnell tried to forget that twice before Aston Martins have finished second at Le Mans. By now, Salvadori was 2 laps behind the Jean de Bien Hill Ferrari. The Trintignant Frère Aston was third. The 4th-placed car, the Belgian-entered 250 GT Ferrari, was a further 19 laps behind, after all 4 works Porsches had retired in quick succession. Then at 11 a.m., after 263 laps, Jean Dubien pitted the Ferrari unexpectedly. David Brown and Sterling Moss peered down the pit lane in anticipation. The Ferrari was overheating and sounded terrible. Little could be done, so the car was sent out again. "Just give it your best," said Reg to Trintignant. "Good luck," said David Brown. The Aston's exhaust had been rerouted under the car by the pedal box, and this gave Salvadori a burned foot. Not the only time that Roy got a singeing from Aston Martins. After the plombeurs had refixed the seals, the Aston quickly got underway. At Mulsanne, Shelby brought the Aston onto the same lap as the Ferrari. By now, only 17 cars out of the 53 starters remained in the race. "The Ferrari's sick. We've still got a chance," enthused Parnell to Salvadori. The sweat-soaked Shelby jumped out, and once again the Aston mechanics leapt into action. "Go," shouted Reg, and Salvadori got on his way. His co-driver got hearty pats on the back from the team manager and Le Patron. Soon after, Jean Dubien returned with the crippled Ferrari, finally to retire. The Ferraris had simply been running too quickly, compromising their reliability. Reg's plan looked as if it was going to work. At Mulsanne, the news was signalled to the two Astons, who were now first and second. The next car, the GT Ferrari, was over 20 laps adrift. Salvadori immediately dropped his pace to 4 minutes 50 per lap, but Trintignant continued to push. The Aston pit urged him to slow for several laps, finally having to give him the message not to overtake Salvadori before he dropped his pace. The opposition was now annihilated. The Astons cruised, and only mechanical failure could rob them of victory. "This one's ours," said Shelby to Parnell, Brown and Moss. At 2:20, Salvadori brought the Aston in to hand over to Shelby for the final stint. The car was refueled and oiled for the last time. The team took their time, as they were well ahead. the big Texan in the saddle, the team began the long and nail-biting wait for 4 o'clock. Down the pit straight, the 3-litre straight 6 sounded in excellent health. Salvadorian Frere were told to hold position and cruise around the course for the remaining laps. In the pits, pacemaker Moss had set his sights on a different challenge. Well, go on, Bernard, you ask her. Innis Island, as usual, was the one to break the ice. Shelby slowed down on his last lap in order to take the checkered flag just after 4 o'clock. But by mistake, the organisers failed to show him the flag, and he had to go round again. Aston number 6 came home to finish second. Finally, after completing an extra lap, Shelby was shown the flag, after almost everyone else. He was immediately swamped by the enthusiastic crowd. The winning Aston had completed 2,701 miles at an average speed of 112.5 miles an hour. Moss's early pace had stretched the Ferraris. Regg's strategy had increased reliability. But victory above all was for one man, David Brown, whose faith had finally been rewarded. Roy Salvadori and Carroll Shelby had shattered all 3-litre records to win the 1959 Le Mans.